I guess too, I'd like to, when someone's going to build a manure project, I think that's kind of there's a lot of misinformation about how you go about it. You know, you read articles, people think that the manure, it's going to fail, it's going to leach. Can maybe you clear up, like, what's the process? Someone comes to you, says, I want to build a manure project. What kind of go through the steps so people realize there's a lot of,
there is, yeah.
There's a lot of safety guards put. You don't just go out in there and throw something up and you're done in a week. There's a long, multi-year process typically.
So certainly we go out to the farm, get eyes on the ground, see what you got going on. We got to know what type of livestock are we dealing with, how many, what the sizes, what type of product, what type of manure are we working with? What's your farming operation? How are you going to apply this manure? Okay, once we capture it, what are you going to do after you've stored it? How are you going to apply it? Is that practical? Then we would contact. I get in touch with my engineer, or an engineer. We say, hey, do you have time to work with us on this project? Also ask the farm, do you have a nutrient management plan in place? If not, it's always good to get one, because we got to know, how big is this storage going to be? What are all the waste streams, I'll call it, on the farm, from not just manure, but milk house wash waste, younger stock. It's not just the milking dairy cows, it's the young stock, the heifers. All that's going to get collected as well. What volume are we talking? And then what's the nutrient value of it? So it's always good to have the nutrient planner involved with that as well. So we start putting all that information together, and then talking with the farm. Okay, were you thinking of locating it? Location's a big issue too. You mentioned a good one about making sure they don't leak. So what style of storage do you want? There's the above ground big blue slurry stores. It's approved. There's concrete, an all concrete structure. That's an NRCS approved structure as well. There's also what could be, we call them earthen storages, which is where you excavate the earth into a pond containment system, and they do have to be lined, either clay or a non-permeable PE membrane, which is like a plastic membrane, which is a liner. And then there's different styles of that. Will it have a concrete bottom? How do you bed? What type of manure are we talking? If it's sand, we're probably going to work with you to design something different than if you were bedding with sawdust. Do you want to cover and flare the methane gas coming off the storage? If that's the case, we can look at maybe building something that might be a little bit smaller, because now we're not going to be capturing ambient rainfall.
Yeah, it's another thing. Rainfall, you have to calculate that in as well.
Some of these storages are 25 to 30% larger than they need to be, because we're blessed with so much rainfall in this area, especially with climate change. And that could be a whole other podcast, with the increasing rainfall we're seeing in our area. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. And then of course it gets engineered, and you're having conversations all the time with the farm. Do we take this into account? Also working with the manure handler, like for yourself, you might go with a company that's going to come in and spread that manure for you in the spring, because you're going to do something different. Maybe you've always surface spread with a manure spreader of some kind. Now you want to inject it and do a drag line operation, and that you might have a custom operator do that for you. So we've designed the perfect storage, and here it is, just fantastic. And we've put it right in between the three barns, let's say, because that's where all the manure is going to go. And then the manure processor, the manure handler, comes in and says, how do I get my truck in here? Where do I pump from? Oops.
Yeah.
There's so many players that really need to come to the table, and because somebody's going to have a great suggestion, or somebody's going to say, well, don't forget about turnaround.
Yeah.
Or where I
get
tractor trailer, where do I get the tractor in? If I want to just haul to it and I want to just dump manure into it, you got to have some kind of a turnaround and accommodation. So yeah, so all that goes into the engineering. Then the engineer would draw it up after everybody's kind of passed their blessing on it, like, yep, this will work.
That takes 6+ months lots of times. That whole planning process, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely,
or over a year.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's a lot of thought.
And you can time into that it doesn't have to be certainly the size. We have to know when we make application for the grant, we have to know the size of it, how many animal units are going into it, the length of time of storage. That's another thing. How long of storage do you want? Now, with our grants, state of New York builds only 6 months or more of storage. Like you couldn't say, well, Paul, we just want 3 months of storage. I can't help cost share that because the state tells us 6 months minimum storage. So that'll deter you might say, Paul, we want it for a year, just in case. We want a year's worth of storage. Well, there's a big difference from a 6 month storage to a year's storage in size and cost. So I have to know going for the grant, okay, what's the general cost of this project? Because there's no sense getting a grant for $100,000 if the storage is going to cost $1 million.
Yeah.
And then you got to come up with $900,000. I mean, and then there's on the other side when you go, and like I said, these grants are competitive. So if I just wildly guess and say I'm going to go for $900,000, but let's say the storage after engineered and it gets bid to contractor, they say, yeah, this is a $600,000 storage. I might have shot myself in the foot trying to get $800,000 and not be competitive and not get anything when I could have gone just for $500,000, $600,000, and maybe got the grant and the storage. We could build it and get it done. So there's a lot of things in that. There's a lot of consideration. So
yeah, and typically, what is it? 70 to 75% the grant will cover. So if you had
we go up to 75%.
So there's let's say it costs $1 million, which isn't out of the question. A lot of them,
it's not.
It doesn't have to be a big project to hit $1 million.
Right.
You would cover $750,000. The farmer would be roughly cover the remainder.
Yeah.
And then we didn't even talk about it. You have transfer lines.
There's transfer system. You got to get it from the barn to the storage. Yeah. So you have to determine where is the storage. Is it above? Is the elevation going to be higher than the elevation of where I'm trying to send it from? That takes all different kinds of equipment versus equipment used if the storage is at a lower elevation, topography speaking, than the farmstead. So there's going to be different types of equipment in there moving that manure, and what's the slurry of the manure? What's the consistency, the viscosity? What am I trying to move? I mean, that's all different considerations.
Yeah, it's not like pumping water.
No, it's not. It is not. Correct.
Well, that's where you even get sometimes if people run into trouble, you hear them talking about separating. You can separate manure.
You can.
You know that, yeah.
Yep,
and then you basically you retain the solids and you can bed with them or spread them on your field as just a dry solid, and you're just pumping water, basically effluent water at that point.
And the water's got the nutrient in it, and you can send that to the storage. You talked about the separation. There are farms that do separate and they compost and they put that separated material, they put it in a covered building and a compost. I hear it reaches within 2 weeks, the internal core temperature of that compost can be over 150 degrees. And it kills a lot of the bacteria, and you can reincorporate that material then as bedding. And they say it's just as comfortable as sand bedding. I know there's I'm not an expert in cow comfort, but just getting feedback from other producers and engineers that work on these, I hear good things about recovered manure solids for bedding.
Yeah, you hear that, and then I've also had guys tell me who do. I've never really had much experience with recovered manure bedding, but I've had guys tell me it's better to use it like it's separated and it hits the ground. The fresher, the better. That's what some guys will tell you.
Really?
I don't know. That's all.
I don't either. Like I say,
I think it might be one of those. It's every farm is different, and it's hey, this works for our farm. We did it this way, and it was a disaster. I don't know. It's just
right.
So it's funny you say you hear it works great if it sits, and then I've heard people tell me it works great right as soon as it hits off the conveyor, we scoop it up and throw it in the stall. So,
and that's where I'm going to use that word again, network.
Yeah,
network. If you're hearing this podcast and you're interested in manure storage, you know what I would say? Call your local soil and water district. Say I'm interested. Is there one I can go look at?
Yeah.
Can I? can you set me up? Maybe talk to the farm. Can you? Yeah, I'd be happy. I'd be happy to call like I'd call you. And Eric, is it okay if Joe Smith comes by? He's interested. He's not sure. Can they just ask you some questions?
Yeah.
Start networking. Start asking questions. Because like you say, it doesn't happen overnight. We can't build these in a month or 2 months. It's really a year process of planning, designing. How are we going to do it? Then applying for the grant, getting the grant. After you get the grant, we have to make a contract with the state. So we put together a plan of work. And then until we get a contract from the state saying, okay, you have the money, the grant's been awarded, but now you actually have the money, and Soil and Water, here's the money you applied for the grant. It is now in this bank account that gets set up for this farm project. It's a year at least in the planning.
And I think I know just from personal talking with a lot of friends and other farmers about what did you build? Why did you build it? Would you build it differently?
Mm-hmm.
What doesn't work?
Yeah.
When you talk to people who've used them for years or have multiple, some guys have multiple pits,
mm-hmm.
throughout satellite pits, whatnot, and you really get a lot of
Did you do that? Did you?
Oh yeah.
Knocked on some doors and.
Just friends from school.
And isn't that great?
Yeah,
that's the way to do it.
I have a lot of Tyler Beck, our neighbor. They move a lot of manure themselves. They do it basically all in house, and they have multiple pits. And so I ask him, why did you build it this way, or how was your new pit, or and you get a lot of good information where okay, let's try to build this so it's.
Or what would you do different?
Yeah,
maybe you thought it was perfect, but if you could redo it, would there be anything you change?
Because I think even we, in our own, we told you we were going to do an earthen with a concrete floor. You did the grant, and then we got approved. And I said, well, no, never mind. We'll do it all concrete. It's like, well, you can do that. Just you're going to have to pay more out of pocket, which we're fine with that.
Right.
But we figured, you hear stories of. The guys that had those big boat agitators, they sometimes get just a little bit too close to the earthen wall, and it knocks a hole, could pop a hole where they hit concrete. It's going to bend a propeller before it breaks the concrete wall. So,
and that is, I'm so glad you brought that up. It's okay to change designs. Always ask, reach out like you did with us. You say, hey, we want to change the style, the type. It was still approved. It was still an approved type of containment, manure storage, concrete, fine. We had that discussion and you knew kind of upfront, okay, the cost will go up. But, when we applied for the grant, we got a certain amount, and that's all I got to work with. I can't apply for more. I can't get more. I just have this amount to work with. And, we had that discussion. We just sent a quick email up to the state saying, hey, just so you know, on our application, it was earthen with a PE liner, but farmers chosen to go concrete. Just getting your blessing there. Yep. Everything's fine with that. Okay. And it turned out to be no big deal. And
no, yeah. And we were happy with it.
That's great.
We knew that we were going to have to cover it, but
that's what you wanted to do.
That's what we wanted to do. And
yeah.
So it's, it was something else I was going to bring up. The, was it the concrete? I had something that was gone, but
it'll come back.
I find myself doing that more and more. Yeah.
Was it in the transfer line or something?
No, it had something to do with the earth and I was gonna say in terms of leaking, I don't know of any that have they don't fail.
I'm not aware of any that have. Maybe some have. I'm just saying I'm not aware of any.
Yeah, I can't think of any. And I know even if you did have a failure, there's a tile typically in the bottom of these, and you can check the tile, and they say if you see any sort of non-water, manure, then that's like
you
a
got
fail
a problem
safe.
and you got to investigate.
Yeah, and I think I've heard of one place that had that issue. They checked it, and they had a little bit of manure, and it was an older pit. I can't remember who it was. I mean, I wouldn't say it anyway, but and they cleaned the pit out and they repaired it or whatever, and it was so it didn't cause any issues. It was because it
was a detection
worked.
system.
The
detection system worked.
So I think people need to realize that these things are well built, well engineered, and
all the planning you can do. You can never do too much planning. The more planning you can do up front, and investigating and talking and asking other farms how they like it, and then bringing in the soil and water district and the engineer and the farm, and like, okay, what are our expectations, and how do we want to how much management do I want in this, or do I want to just turn it over to the manure handler, and we bring in the manure handling company and say, okay, this is what we're doing, get their input. I always say, spend an hour, get all the team players together, because boy, it's a heck of a lot easier to change a plan at that point than once you pour the concrete.
Yeah. Yeah, once they start putting up forms, and it's hard to...
It's a lot easier to erase pencil and paper than to jackhammer concrete.
Yeah. If you have a feeling in your gut that something's not right or something needs to be changed, it's never a bad thing to...
No.
You can always change your mind.
Exactly.
You don't want to live with a system that you end up being mad because you didn't...
Yeah.
You didn't change it, so...
Exactly. We want all the soil and water districts. We always work to see the success for the farm. Man, when you're happy, we know it's working, because then you're going to manage it, and you're gonna take care of it, and you're going to optimize that BMP, and that's always our goal.